The call came from a number I'd blocked. My brother was screaming like something had finally found him. 2 days after emptying my life savings, he was begging me to stay on the line. I didn't speak. I sat on the edge of my bed, phone pressed to my ear, listening to the sound of a man realizing silence can be louder than anger. 48 hours earlier, I had woken up to a balance that looked like a typo. Years of overtime, missed birthdays, a future I'd been quietly building. Gone. I checked again and again. Same zeroed-out account. His name sat there in the transaction history, neat and final. Power of attorney. My mistake. My blood. I didn't cry. Not at first. Shock has a way of freezing tears before they're born. I drove to his apartment. Empty, clothes gone. Laptop gone. The photo of us as kids gone too. That was the moment something inside me stopped asking why. Why is for people who still expect fairness. I sent one message. Just one, are you? No reply. Friends stopped answering when they realized what he'd done. Family told me to. Be patient. Blood is blood, they said. At night I lay awake, replaying every time I defended him, every excuse I made, every warning I ignored. He had been practicing on me for years, borrowing, forgetting, smiling when I swallowed it. Now the smile was gone, and so was my money. I didn't call the police, not yet. Instead I did something unfamiliar. I went quiet. I pulled his credit report. I read every document I'd ever signed. I sat alone in coffee shops, listening to other people live their lives while mine lay hollowed out. That's when I noticed the pattern. The rush transfers, the overseas account, the business partner whose name didn't exist 6 months ago. He hadn't just stolen from me. He had built a trap and stepped into it in a hurry. I waited. On the third night, the call came. Please, he gasped. I need you. I could hear sirens somewhere behind his voice. Or maybe it was panic. Either way, it sounded deserved. They froze everything, he said. The money, it's stuck. I didn't know. I still didn't speak. They think it's fraud, he whispered. They think I did something illegal. I closed my eyes. The irony was almost gentle. You're the only one who can fix this, he said. You're listed. You have to say it was a mistake. That word finally unlocked the tears. He cried. I didn't. He didn't know what I'd done during my silence. Didn't know I'd forwarded every document to the compliance team at the bank. Didn't know I'd let them find the inconsistencies themselves. Truth is heavier when you don't decorate it, he said. His voice cracked. That was the knife. I hung up. The next weeks were quiet. Painfully so. I moved out of my apartment, sold what I didn't need, started over in a smaller place with bare walls and no photographs. The bank returned what they could. Not all of it. Enough to survive, enough to rebuild. He sent messages from new numbers. Promises, threats. I read none of them. Months passed. Then a year. I heard he was facing charges in another country. That his partner disappeared. That family stopped defending him once his excuses ran out. I never corrected them. One evening, long after I'd stopped checking for his name, my phone rang again. Unknown number. I answered this time. His voice was quieter. Smaller. They say I might not come back, he said. I looked around my new life. The modest desk. The steady job I'd earned without shortcuts. The peace that comes when you stop hoping people will be who they aren't. I know, I said. That was all. I didn't hang up quickly. I let the silence stretch just long enough for him to feel it. Then I ended the call. Some people think revenge has to be loud. It doesn't. Sometimes it's just refusing to save someone who drowned themselves, and learning how to breathe without them. The silence after that call didn't feel empty. It felt sealed. I didn't check the news. Didn't ask questions. I learned the hard way that curiosity is just pain wearing a smarter coat. Instead, I focused on routines. Wake up early. We're home. Cook something simple. Sleep without checking my phone. At first, the nights were the worst. That's when memories lose their manners. My mind replayed childhood scenes like evidence I couldn't submit anywhere. 2 boys sharing a room. Him taking the bigger half of everything. Me letting him. Always letting him. I started writing things down. Not for him, for me. Every small detail I'd ignored over the years. The temporary favors. The way he'd disappear whenever responsibility showed up, then reappear when someone else had built something worth taking. Seeing it on paper did something strange. It removed him from the center of the story. He was no longer my brother who betrayed me. He was a pattern that finally ended. Work changed too. I stopped being invisible. When you lose everything, you stop being afraid of losing approval. I spoke less, but when I did, people listened. I stayed late without resentment. Learned things no one bothered to teach me before. Promotion offers don't arrive with fireworks. They arrive quietly, disguised as more responsibility. I accepted without celebrating. Money returned slowly. Not the stolen kind. The earned kind. It felt heavier in my hands. Honest weight. Every few weeks, someone would mention his name like they were testing a wound. Have you heard from him? No. That was enough. Then one afternoon an envelope arrived, no return address. Inside was a single piece of paper, a photocopy of a legal document, a language I barely recognized. My name circled, his name stamped, frozen assets, ongoing investigation. He had tried to undo what he did, too late. I folded the paper and placed it in a drawer I rarely opened. I didn't need proof anymore. Closure isn't something you receive. It's something you stop asking for. Time did what revenge stories never talk about. It made him smaller without my help, and it made me bigger without his permission. Years passed. I moved again. Better place, more light, plants I didn't forget to water. Friends who didn't ask for explanations. I learned how to say no without guilt. How to say yes without fear. One night I ran into someone who knew him well. Too well they hesitated before speaking, like his name might still own something in me. He asks about you. They said. I waited. He says you abandoned him. I smiled. Not out of joy, out of clarity. Abandonment is what people call it when you stop bleeding for them. I went home that night and slept deeply, no dreams. No ghosts, just rest. The last call came years later, long after I'd stopped counting how long it had been. The voice on the other end was unfamiliar at first, older, slower. Life has a way of sanding people down until the truth shows through. I don't expect anything, he said. I just needed you to know I get it now. I didn't ask what it was. I thought I was smarter than consequences, he continued. Turns out I was just faster than them. They caught up. I listened. Not because I owed him, but because I could. I don't want forgiveness, he said. I just don't want to disappear without saying this. There it was, the thing he feared most. Not jail, not poverty, erasure. You already did, I said calmly. A long time ago. He inhaled sharply, like the words had taken something physical from him. I hope you're happy, he said. I looked around. At the quiet order of my life, at the absence of chaos, at the fact that no one could reach into my world without permission anymore. I am, I said, and meant it. When the line went dead, I didn't feel triumph. I felt finality. People misunderstand revenge. They think it's about causing pain. It's not. It's about refusing to carry someone else's damage forever. It's about letting the truth stand on its own, without your voice propping it up. I never shouted. Never exposed him publicly, never chased him for answers. I let the world do what it does best when you step aside and stop interfering. Now, when I check my bank balance, it's not the number that matters. It's the name on the account. Only mine. And sometimes late at night, I think about the scream in his voice from that first call. The moment he realized the bridge was gone and no one was coming back with wood. That was the last thing he ever took from me. After that, everything I built stayed exactly where it belonged. I used to think the story ended there. Clean break, quiet victory, life reclaimed. But trauma doesn't disappear just because justice shows up late. There were mornings I woke up with a weight on my chest, like I'd forgotten something important. Not fear, not sadness, something closer to vigilance. As if part of me was still guarding a door that no one knocked on anymore. That's what betrayal does. It teaches your body lessons your mind has already passed. I started therapy without telling anyone. Not because I was ashamed, but because this was the first thing I wanted to heal without witnesses. Saying his name out loud in that room felt strange. Smaller, less dangerous. The therapist asked one question that stayed with me. What did you lose that money couldn't replace? The answer came instantly: innocence. I'd believed loyalty was permanent, that love could override character, that shared blood meant shared limits. When that belief died, it collapsed quietly like a building emptied before demolition. But in that empty space, something else began to form. Discernment. I became careful in a way that wasn't fearful. I listened more, watched patterns instead of promises. When people spoke, I heard what they avoided as clearly as what they said. Some didn't like the new version of me. I stopped explaining. Success followed that silence. I took risks that used to terrify me, applied for positions I once thought were out of my league. Negotiated salaries without apologizing. Walked away from deals that smelled wrong even when they looked profitable. Funny thing about being betrayed by the person closest to you after that, nothing else feels truly threatening. One evening, while cleaning out old files, I found an email thread from years ago. My brother asking for access. Me hesitating, him reassuring me. Lines that once felt harmless now glowed like warnings I'd ignored. I didn't delete them, I archived them. Not as evidence, as education. Months later, I was invited to speak at a small financial ethics workshop. Someone had noticed my work, my discipline, my refusal to cut corners. They asked how I learned to be so meticulous. I paused before answering. Experience, I said. I didn't elaborate. After the talk, a young man approached me nervous. Ernest, he said he was thinking of trusting a family member with a large sum of money. What would you do? He asked. I looked at him carefully. At the hope in his eyes, the assumption that love is a shield. I'd separate love from access, I said. If they're offended by boundaries, they were planning to cross them. He nodded slowly, like something heavy had just landed but hadn't crushed him yet. That night, I realized something quietly powerful. My revenge had evolved. It wasn't just that my brother lost what he stole. It was that his actions had turned me into someone who could prevent the same damage in others. Time kept moving. It always does. Faces changed, cities blurred. But every now and then, his shadow tried to return through other people. A distant cousin once suggested reconciliation. He's family, they said. People change. I smiled politely. So do doors, I replied, some only close ones. They never brought it up again. Years later, I heard he was sick. Not tragically, just worn down by the life he'd built on shortcuts. Consequences are rarely cinematic. They're repetitive, exhausting, boring. He sent one last message through someone else. No apology this time. No request, just, I hope you're well. I read it once. Then I deleted it, not out of anger, out of completion. Because here's the truth no one likes to admit. Forgiveness is optional, closure is internal, and reconciliation is earned, not inherited. I didn't need him to understand me anymore. Understanding is for relationships. We no longer had one. What we had was history. And history doesn't get to vote on your future today. My life is quiet in the best way. Predictable mornings, honest work. People around me who don't need rescuing and don't expect access to what isn't theirs. Sometimes I catch my reflection and see someone older than my years, but steadier. Someone who knows that trust is a gift, not a default setting. If there's a lesson buried under all this, it's not about money. It's this. The most devastating revenge isn't destruction. It's survival without them. Growth that doesn't include their name. Peace they're not invited into. My brother once took everything I thought mattered. In doing so, he accidentally gave me something far more valuable. A life that no longer revolved around saving anyone but myself. And that's the kind of ending no scream can undo. Months turned into years, but the echoes of his betrayal never fully left me. Not like a haunting, but like a faint pulse beneath the surface reminding me what I had endured and what I refused to become. Every time I walked into a room, I noticed things most people overlooked. Subtle shifts in tone, hesitations in speech. The way greed or entitlement could sit in someone's eyes like an unwelcome shadow. I had trained myself to see it, to feel it before it even acted. And yet, I was careful not to let it consume me. That was the difference between him and me. He had let impulse, desire, and selfishness dictate his life. I had let betrayal teach me discipline, patience, and focus. Every night I wrote in my journal small notations, observations, reflections. It was a record of my survival, my growth, my silent victories. Nothing flashy, nothing dramatic, but heavy with consequence. One evening, as I pored over old account statements, not to dwell, but to understand patterns, I realized something chilling. The way he had taken my money wasn't reckless. It had been precise, almost surgical. He had studied my habits, my blind spots, and executed a plan with terrifying accuracy. That realization could have terrified me, but instead it fueled a new awareness. If someone could take so much from me quietly, I could rebuild even more quietly and stronger. I started making moves I would never have dared before. Investments, small, calculated risk connections. Quietly observing people, measuring intentions, noting every discrepancy between their words and their actions. And each time I succeeded, the memory of him calling me in desperation came back, not to wound me, but to remind me that patience, observation, and silence are sometimes louder than screams. The real test came unexpectedly. I met a man in my professional life, someone who carried charm like armor. Within weeks, I saw the cracks: arrogance disguised as confidence, entitlement disguised as wit. His eyes briefly flickered when I mentioned procedures he didn't understand. He assumed I hadn't noticed I had. And in noticing, I gained power. It was almost poetic how it mirrored what my brother had done to me. The same arrogance, the same belief that no one else would see the pattern, would stop the flow. And yet I didn't act impulsively. I watched, I waited. Like water wearing down stone, I let him reveal himself in subtle ways. Misplaced files, overconfidence in conversation, unconscious lies. Every time he stumbled, I filed it away. Every mistake added to the quiet architecture of his eventual undoing. By the time action was necessary, it was no longer revenge, it was consequence. I had let the world deliver the punishment for me. And then, one day, the culmination came. A critical proposal he had been trying to claim credit for fell apart, not because of me, not directly, but because his lies, unchecked, were documented and undeniable. The board confronted him. His voice, once loud, full of assumed control, trembled. I stood at the edge of the room, silent, watching as he tried to justify himself. Every word he used was a brick in the cage he had built around his own life. I didn't intervene, I didn't speak, I didn't gloat. Silence was my weapon now. The quiet patience I had learned from years of betrayal did the work for me. He stumbled through the meeting, exposed by his own choices. The world had watched. And in the aftermath, I realized something: revenge doesn't need drama, it needs precision. At home that night, I looked at the reflection in the mirror and didn't recognize the person staring back immediately. Not because I had changed dramatically, but because I had evolved. There was a weight in my eyes that hadn't been there before, calm, unshakable, unwavering. The trauma, the loss, the betrayal had left scars, yes, but scars that reminded me I was stronger than anyone who tried to break me. And yet there were moments of doubt. Moments where I questioned whether all the silence, all the patience, all the careful observation was worth the years it had cost me. I wondered if, somewhere along the way, I had become what I despised: calculating, cold, detached. But then I reminded myself the difference between me and him was clarity. He acted out of impulse. I acted out of awareness, and that made all the difference. As months rolled into years, I created boundaries that could not be crossed. People respected them, sometimes begrudgingly, sometimes gratefully. I became known not for fear or intimidation, but for the quiet authority that comes from surviving a storm most wouldn't live through. Every decision was informed by lessons learned, not from textbooks, but from betrayal, from observing human greed, and from enduring pain without reacting impulsively. And then came the unexpected. One afternoon I received a letter. No sender, just my name on the envelope. Inside was a single sentence. I know you're alive. I know you moved on. I can't undo the past. But I see now that you were stronger than I ever was. I didn't recognize the handwriting immediately, But there was no mistaking the meaning, it was him. My brother, older now, diminished, humbled. And yet this wasn't a call for forgiveness. It wasn't an attempt to reclaim what he had lost. It was acknowledgement, a final recognition that I had survived, grown, and prevailed without his help. I read it once, folded it, and placed it in the drawer with the archived documents of his misdeeds. Not as evidence, not as a trophy, but as a monument to the life I had reclaimed. Because here's the secret that most revenge stories never admit: the most devastating revenge isn't the scream, the exposure, or the public humiliation. It's quiet, it's measured, it's a life rebuilt so fully, so intentionally, that the person who tried to destroy it becomes irrelevant. They fade into memory, like a shadow whose source has already moved on. Time continued to move, as it always does, and I discovered something deeper in those years of rebuilding. Freedom isn't found in money or recognition or vengeance. It's found in control over your own narrative, in learning that no one else gets to dictate the trajectory of your life. Betrayal will happen, but it doesn't have to define you. The choice of how to respond, that is the real power. I became someone who didn't just survive betrayal, I became someone who thrived despite it. My brother's actions, as painful as they were, became the crucible through which I forged my resilience, patience, and discernment. The scream on the phone, the desperation he had shown, was not a victory of mine, but a reflection of the universe balancing itself. He had built his own trap, and his own choices delivered him into it. I simply existed outside of it, stronger and untouched by his chaos. And in the quiet moments, late at night, when the world is asleep and the past threatens to whisper, I allow myself to remember. Not out of bitterness, not out of longing, but as a testament. A reminder that survival and patience are a form of art. That revenge is not about destruction, but about persistence. That silence, carefully maintained, can be sharper than any scream. My life now is full, not in a way that seeks attention or applause, but in a way that feels complete. I am content, steady, mindful, and above all free. Free from fear, free from manipulation, free from the weight of someone else's betrayal. And somewhere in a life far removed from mine, my brother understands this in his own way. Perhaps he will always carry regret. Perhaps he will never rebuild the life he tried to steal from me. But that is not my concern anymore. My life is no longer a reaction to him. It is a story I write every single day, quietly, and beautifully. That is revenge, not the scream, not the collapse, not the chaos, but the reclaiming of life piece by piece, in a way so complete that the one who tried to break you becomes irrelevant. And in that, I found peace. The strange thing about peace is that it doesn't announce itself. It arrives quietly, almost suspiciously, like it's waiting for you to reject it. For a long time, I didn't trust it. When things went too smoothly, I caught myself preparing for impact. I checked accounts twice. I reread contracts 3 times. I memorized exit routes from conversations that didn't even feel dangerous. Betrayal had rewired something deep inside me. Not fear, awareness. But awareness, if you don't let it rot into paranoia, becomes strength. I built my life in layers after that, nothing exposed, nothing fragile, every part of it able to stand alone if another collapsed. I didn't call it mistrust, I called it architecture. People came and went. Some stayed longer than expected, a few earned access I never thought I'd give again. Trust this time was not blind, it was tested quietly. Over time, under pressure, and those who passed never knew they were being measured. That's when I realized I had finally changed. The old me believed explanations fixed things. The new me understood that patterns matter more than apologies. One night, while cleaning my desk, I found the old notebook, the one from the early days, filled with raw entries, anger scribbled between lines of exhaustion. I read a few pages and didn't recognize the voice. It sounded wounded, desperate to be understood. I closed it gently. That version of me had done his job. He survived the bleeding stage, he didn't need to speak anymore. A few weeks later, something unexpected happened. I was contacted by an investigator working on a financial case overseas. Routine questions, they said. My brother's name came up again, like a bad habit the universe hadn't fully kicked. This time it didn't hurt. I answered calmly, factually, no emotion attached. When the call ended, I noticed my hands weren't shaking. That's when I knew I was free, not healed free. Healing implies something was broken. Freedom means you're no longer owned by what broke you. They told me he tried to blame others, partners, systems, circumstances, the same old language. But without me to anchor his lies, nothing held. He had always needed someone stable nearby to lean on, to steal from, to redirect blame toward. Without me in his orbit, he collapsed inward. Some people don't fall because they're pushed. They fall because there's finally no one left holding them up. Later that year, I stood in a room filled with people celebrating an achievement I'd worked years for. There were speeches, applause, cameras. Someone mentioned my journey. I nodded politely. They didn't know the real one. They didn't know that every success felt quieter because I had learned not to announce survival. That winning, after betrayal, feels less like joy and more like confirmation. Confirmation that silence was the right choice. Confirmation that patience outlives cruelty. That night, alone again, I poured a drink and sat by the window. City lights blinking like distant signals. Somewhere out there, my brother existed in a life completely detached from mine. And that was the point. People think revenge ends when the villain loses. It doesn't. It ends when you stop checking whether they did. Years ago, I would have wanted him to see this moment, to know I was okay. Better than okay, thriving. Now, I understood something deeper. If he ever truly changed, he wouldn't need to see me, and if he hadn't, my absence was punishment enough. I stopped revisiting the past after that. Not consciously, it just lost its grip. Like a scar you forget until someone points it out. Occasionally, someone new would enter my life and ask about family. I answered simply, no bitterness, no drama. We're not close, I'd say. That was the truth, clean, undeniable. And then one day, long after the dust had settled, I received a message from a stranger. Short, careful, almost afraid. I don't know if you remember me. I used to know your brother. I just wanted to say you didn't deserve what he did. I saw it then. I was too weak to stop it. I stared at the message longer than expected. This time I replied. Thank you for saying that. I wrote. I'm okay now. And I was, not because justice was perfect, not because the money all came back, not because he suffered enough, but because I learned the one lesson betrayal tries to teach too late. You don't win by fixing the damage someone else caused. You win by building something they can never reach. My brother once emptied my life savings and vanished. 2 days later, he called me screaming. That scream marked the end of his control, not the beginning of my revenge. The revenge had already started the moment I chose silence over chaos, patience over rage, and self-respect over family loyalty that demanded self-destruction. Now, my life moves forward without looking back for permission. And if his name ever crosses my path again, it will do so like any other ghost, noticed, acknowledged, and left behind. Because some doors don't need to be locked. They just need to be closed once and never reopened. Life moved in quiet rhythms after that. Mornings with sun slipping across my desk. Evenings with shadows stretching across walls I had chosen myself. No chaos, no surprises, no him. I didn't speak of the past much. There was no need. The world already knew enough through the lines in my face, the careful way I carried myself, the quiet weight of someone who had survived something brutal and come out intact. And yet, sometimes the memories surfaced. Small things, a transaction I'd ignored, a smile he used to wear when taking advantage, a laugh that once seemed harmless but now felt like a warning. At first, those memories stung sharp, like cold steel sliding along skin. But over time, they became markers of how far I had come. I didn't hate him anymore, not fully. I didn't need to. Hatred is heavy, it keeps you bound to the one who wronged you. I was done carrying that weight. Instead, I felt clarity. I understood, finally, that what he had taken from me, my money, my trust, my peace, was nothing compared to what he had handed me unwittingly: the ability to survive, the ability to rebuild, the ability to see clearly. Every lie, every theft, every moment of betrayal had been a lesson disguised as pain. And I had mastered it. The people around me noticed. Quietly, respectfully. They didn't ask the questions that once would have led me to cry on their shoulders. They saw someone disciplined, unshakable, aware. Someone whose calm presence was more powerful than anger or vengeance ever could be. Then one day, I received another message. Not from him directly, not from someone trying to connect. Just a small note delivered through a mutual acquaintance. He's in trouble. All the schemes he relied on are collapsing. He has nowhere to turn. I read it, and for a long moment I didn't react. There was no glee, no satisfaction, only the recognition of cause and effect. The world has a way of balancing itself, sometimes slowly, sometimes brutally. I didn't need to interfere, I had already done my part by doing nothing. The weeks that followed were uneventful for me, but I watched quietly from a distance. Legal actions, failed business ventures, partners abandoning him. Small details easily dismissed by anyone else, but for me they were the inevitable consequences of choices made recklessly, without regard for others, and he had built his life entirely on such choices. One night, long after the dust had settled around his mistakes, I walked through my apartment, past photos of trips I had taken alone, plants I had nurtured carefully, mementos of friends who had earned their place in my life. And I realized, this life I had constructed quietly, deliberately, without shouting, without anger, was the final act of revenge, not loud, not public, not messy. Perfect in its simplicity. I sat at my desk, the light soft against my face, and for the first time in years I let myself remember the first scream, the one on the phone 2 days after he vanished with my life savings. That scream had once terrified me. It had once represented everything I had lost. Now, it represented nothing but history. Because the true revenge, I realized, had never been about him. It had been about me. I had taken my life back piece by piece, carefully, quietly. Each decision, each small act of discipline, each moment of refusing to engage in chaos had been a strike far more precise than anything shouting or confrontation could achieve. And the final piece of the lesson revealed itself in an unexpected way. I no longer feared betrayal. I no longer needed to verify loyalty in the trembling, anxious way I once had. I had learned to trust myself first, and the rest of the world fell into place around that foundation. Years later, my brother's name surfaced again. Faintly in news reports: fraud, arrests, bankruptcy, attempts to rebuild a life that had been meticulously sabotaged by his own recklessness. And I did nothing. I did not call, I did not intervene, I did not rejoice. I simply watched. Because the greatest revenge is not visible, it is silent. It is the life rebuilt so fully, so deliberately, that the one who tried to destroy you becomes irrelevant. I continued to grow, to work, to create spaces in my life untouched by greed or deceit. I traveled quietly, made investments, helped people who respected boundaries. I nurtured friendships slowly, deliberately. Trust was no longer given, it was earned. And those who earned it became family. Those who didn't, I let go without resentment. Then came the moment that truly marked the end. I received a final message, unsigned, from someone who had once known him intimately. It said he knows he lost, and he knows he has no one left to turn to. He asked if you forgive him. He said he's sorry. I held the phone. My thumb hovered over the screen. I read it again. And then I deleted it. Not out of hatred, but out of recognition that forgiveness was not owed. That closure, in truth, had already happened long ago. I didn't need acknowledgement, apology, or reconciliation. I had rebuilt my life. I had grown stronger. I had survived. That was enough. I poured myself a glass of wine and walked to the window. The city lights stretched endlessly. Somewhere out there, he existed in a life diminished by his own choices. Somewhere out there, he faced consequences without my involvement. And that was justice enough. I realized then that revenge is not about the person who wronged you. It is about the one who survived, the one who rebuilt, the one who claimed life in spite of pain. It is the quiet moments of triumph that no one witnesses. It is the peace that comes when you no longer need to shout to be heard. And so I ended the story not with a scream, not with confrontation, not with drama. I ended it with life reclaimed, boundaries unshakable, and peace absolute. Because some doors don't need to be locked. They just need to be closed once and never reopened. And that is the true ending of a life taken, lost, and rebuilt. A life that no one, not even the one who tried to destroy it, can touch again. The silence is my witness, the peace is my proof, and the world, finally, irrevocably, moves forward without him.